I am Dominika, and I've always been the odd one out in my family. The one who didn't fit their polished mold of country club dinners and name-dropping at charity galas. Growing up in a manicured suburb outside Seattle, I was the kid who'd rather sketch ad campaigns in my notebook than play tennis with my brother Elton, who my parents, Vernon and Glenda, treated like he'd invented the sport. Me? I was the afterthought, the one they'd sigh at when I talked about my love for marketing, the way a clever tagline could make a brand stick in your head like a song. They'd roll their eyes, tell me to get a real job like Elton's vague consulting gig, which mostly involved him lounging in Europe on their dime. I never imagined my phone would ring at the perfect moment to turn their world upside down, but before I tell you how that call changed everything, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe. You'll want to see how this ends. My passion for marketing started young. I'd redo cereal box designs in crayons, dreaming up slogans that'd make you crave cornflakes. By high school, I was sneaking into local businesses, pitching them ideas to boost their foot traffic. The owner of a struggling bookstore, Mr. Percy, actually listened. My flyer campaign doubled his weekend sales. And he gave me a $50 gift card I still keep in my wallet. That was my first taste of what I could do. But at home, it was like I was invisible. I'd show Vernon my mock-ups for a fake soda brand, and he'd grunt, "Why waste time on that?" Glenda was worse. She'd shush me to gush about Elton's latest achievement, like the time he networked at a yacht party. They never saw me, not even when I won a statewide marketing contest at 17, with a check for $1,000 I hid under my mattress because I knew they'd make me give it to Elton for his travel fund. Their favoritism wasn't just emotional. It had a price tag. Elton's gap year in Europe? They sent me an actual invoice for $8,000, saying it was my family duty to chip in. I was 20, working 2 jobs while studying, and they expected me to bankroll his wine tasting in Tuscany. I paid it, scraping by on instant noodles, because I thought that's what love meant, proving you belonged. Looking back, I see it for what it was, a transaction. Their love came with terms and conditions, and I was always in debt. That's why I poured everything into my work. After college, I landed a marketing job at a scrappy startup, where I climbed fast, turning their no-name app into a household staple. But even then, Vernon and Glenda barely noticed. At family dinners, they'd grill me about why I wasn't married or buying a mansion like they expected, while Elton, still jobless at 30, got pats on the back for exploring his options. It stung, but I kept going. Building something in secret they'd never understand. My own company, my own rules. I didn't know it yet, but that secret was about to blow their carefully curated world apart. The thing about being invisible in your own family is it leaves scars you don't notice until they're ripped open years later. I can still picture the dining room in our old house, all gleaming mahogany and crystal chandeliers, where Vernon and Glenda would host their annual holiday parties. I was 16, clutching a certificate from a national marketing competition, second place, with my campaign for a local bakery splashed across the judges' slideshow. I'd spent weeks on it, sneaking to the library to use their computers because Vernon said my hobby didn't deserve a laptop. I thought, maybe this time they'd see me. I handed Glenda the certificate, my hands shaking. She glanced at it, muttered, "That's nice, Dominika," and then turned to Elton, who'd just strolled in with a C- report card. "Oh, Elton, you're doing so well balancing school and your social life," she cooed, pinning his report card to the fridge like it was a Nobel Prize. My certificate? It ended up in the trash, crumpled under turkey bones. That wasn't a one-off. When I was 12, I organized a neighborhood talent show to raise money for a dog shelter. We made $200, and the local paper ran a photo of me with a scruffy terrier. I was beaming, thinking Vernon might frame it. Instead, he lectured me about wasting time, while Elton's soccer participation trophy, participation mind you, got a shelf in the living room. By college, I stopped trying to show them anything. I'd graduated magna cum laude, landed a full-ride scholarship for my marketing degree, and all Glenda said at my graduation dinner was, "Dominika, don't you think it's time to settle down?" Elton's thinking of law school. Elton, who'd flunked out of community college and was consulting from their guest house, got a standing ovation for his ambition. The worst was the summer I turned 21. I was interning at a marketing firm, living in a shoebox apartment, when Vernon called. "Dominika, we need your help with Elton's European trip. It's a family effort." I thought he meant moral support until the email arrived, a $10,000 bill for my share. I was working 60-hour weeks, saving for grad school, but I wired the money, too scared to say no. When I visited home that Christmas, Elton showed off photos from Paris, smirking about the family investment. Glenda chimed in, "He's building connections, Dominika, you wouldn't understand." I smiled, but inside I was screaming. They'd never once asked about my internship, where I'd pitched a campaign that got me a job offer on the spot. Those moments piled up, each one a brick in the wall between me and them. I started keeping my wins to myself. Like the time my startup's app hit 1 million downloads, I'd call home, hoping to share, but Vernon would cut me off to brag about Elton's new business venture, a vape shop that folded in 3 months. I learned to stop expecting their pride. Instead, I channeled every ounce of hurt into my work, into building something they couldn't ignore. I didn't know then that my quiet rebellion was laying the foundation for a moment that'd make them choke on their own words. I'll never forget the night it all clicked. I was 26, hunched over a laptop in my tiny Seattle apartment, the kind with peeling paint and a radiator that hissed like it was plotting revenge. I'd been grinding at my startup job, leading campaigns that turned obscure apps into viral hits, but I was restless. My boss, a guy named Floyd who chewed gum like it was his job, had just shot down my latest pitch, a bold rebrand for a failing fitness app. "Too risky, Dominika," he'd said, popping his gum. "Stick to safe." I went home fuming, pacing my cramped living room. When it hit me, I didn't need Floyd's approval. I could build something myself, something nobody could dismiss. The idea was simple but wild, a marketing platform that used AI to craft hyper-personalized ad campaigns for small businesses, the kind Vernon and Glenda would call cute before changing the subject. I called it Spark Vibe, a name I scribbled on a napkin at 2 a.m. while downing cold coffee. The next 6 months were a blur of coding tutorials, maxed out credit cards, and sleepless nights. I taught myself enough Python to prototype the algorithm, roping in a freelance coder named Twyla, who worked for cheap because she believed in the vision. We'd meet at a diner called Rusty's, sketching flowcharts on paper placemats, ignoring the grease stains. The struggle was brutal. My savings dwindled, I dodged landlord calls, and once, I cried in a grocery store because I couldn't afford both bread and milk. But every setback fueled me. I was done being invisible. The aha moment came during a test run. Twyla and I pitched Spark Vibe to a local coffee shop, run by a guy named Grover, whose business was tanking. Our platform analyzed his customer data and spat out a campaign, targeted social ads, quirky email blasts, even a loyalty program. Within a month, his foot traffic tripled. Grover hugged us, tears in his eyes, and handed me a free latte. I sipped like it was champagne. That win lit a fire. I quit my job, poured everything into Spark Vibe, and started signing clients in secret. I didn't tell Vernon or Glenda, not even when we hit 100 clients, then 1,000. Their voices still echoed in my head. "Dominika, why waste your time?" So I kept it quiet, building my empire in the shadows. By 28, Spark Vibe was a machine, generating millions in revenue, but I stayed under the radar. I didn't want the spotlight, not yet. I hired a small team, Twyla, Grover, and a data whiz named Norris, and we worked out of a loft nobody knew about. The world didn't know my name, but every time a client called to say we'd saved their business, I felt seen. I'd built something real, something mine, and it was about to become so big, even Vernon and Glenda couldn't ignore it. I just didn't know how close that moment was. The morning of the family dinner, I woke up with a knot in my stomach, the kind that feels like you've swallowed a rock. Spark Vibe was on the verge of something massive. A deal with a national retail chain that'd take us from a scrappy startup to a household name. Norris had been up all night crunching numbers, and Twyla was prepping our pitch deck, both buzzing with nervous energy in our loft office. I should have been there with them, finalizing details, but instead, I was staring at my closet, dreading the annual charade at Vernon and Glenda's. Every year it was the same. Their sprawling estate outside Seattle, all white marble and manicured hedges, packed with their socialite friends who'd sip Chardonnay and gossip about whose kid landed a better trust fund. And me, trying to survive their judgment without losing my mind. I pulled on a navy blazer and jeans, nice enough to avoid Glenda's side eye, but not so fancy, I'd look like I was trying to impress them. As I drove to their place, my phone pinged with a text from Norris. "Deal's looking solid. Call tonight could seal it." My heart jumped. This was it, the moment Spark Vibe could go stratospheric. But the thought of sitting through dinner with Vernon's lectures and Elton's smirks made me grip the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. I hadn't told them about Spark Vibe, not a word. They still thought I was tinkering at some no-name startup scraping by. Part of me wanted to keep it that way, to protect my world from their poison. Another part, a louder, angrier part, wanted them to choke on their assumptions. Pulling into their driveway, I saw Elton's new BMW, probably another gift from Vernon, parked crooked like he owned the place. I parked my beat-up hatchback next to it, feeling like a trespasser. The house loomed, all glass and sharp angles, screaming wealth. I took a deep breath, remembering the last dinner, when Glenda had cornered me to ask why I wasn't settled like Elton, who'd just moved back into their guest house after his vape shop flopped. I'd smiled, nodded, and gone home to cry in my shower. This time, I promised myself I'd hold it together, no matter what they threw at me. As I walked to the door, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it, figuring it was Twyla with another pitch update. I had no idea that call was about to change everything, that in a few hours I'd be standing in that dining room, watching Vernon and Glenda's faces twist when they realized who I'd become. For now, I just steeled myself, rang the bell and stepped into the lion's den, ready to endure whatever venom they'd spit my way. The dining room smelled of rosemary and old money, with Glenda's prized chandelier casting glints across the mahogany table. I slid into my seat, the same one I'd had since I was a kid, wedged between a potted fern and Elton's elbow. Vernon sat at the head, his silver hair slicked back, already droning about his golf game to a neighbor named Mavis, who nodded like he was reciting poetry. Glenda, in a pearl necklace tight enough to choke her smile, was fussing over the caterers, making sure the salmon was presentable. Elton, slouched across from me, was scrolling his phone, smirking at something I didn't care to know about. The air was thick with their usual performance. Every word, every glance, a flex of their perfect little world where I was the smudge they couldn't wipe away. "Dominika, you're looking practical," Glenda said, her eyes flicking over my blazer like it was a thrift store reject. "Still at that startup, are you?" Her tone was syrupy, but the jab landed. I nodded, forcing a smile, while Vernon chimed in without looking up. "Startups are a young man's game, Dominika. Elton's been advising on some real investments. Crypto, you know." Elton grinned, not correcting him, though I knew his advising was just Vernon's cash propping up his latest whim. I bit my tongue, the old reflex to stay quiet kicking in. The appetizers came, tiny shrimp tarts Glenda called amuse-bouches, and the questions started. Mavis, sipping her wine, leaned in. "Dominika, no ring yet? My niece is your age, already planning her second wedding." Glenda laughed, a sharp little sound. "Oh, Dominika's too busy for that, aren't you? Always working on, what is it, posters or something?" I swallowed a tart, the crust sticking in my throat. "Marketing campaigns," I said, keeping my voice even. "We just hit 1 million users on one of our apps." The table went quiet for half a second, then Elton snorted. "Apps? Good luck with that. I'm closing a deal on an NFT project. That's the future." Vernon clapped his shoulder. "That's my boy." I stared at my plate, the knot in my chest tightening. They didn't ask about my work, didn't care that I'd built something real. Instead, Glenda steered the talk to Elton's European connections, as if his vacation selfies were diplomatic summits. Every backhanded compliment, every dismissive glance was a pinprick, but I kept my face neutral, nodding like I always did. Inside, I was counting the minutes until I could leave, unaware that the night was about to take a turn they'd never see coming. The main course arrived, roasted lamb with some fancy herb glaze Glenda wouldn't stop bragging about, and the room's chatter settled into a low hum. I poked at my plate, the lamb tasteless under the weight of the table's eyes. Vernon cleared his throat, the kind of sound that always meant he was about to hold court. He tapped his wine glass with a fork, and the clink silenced the room. Glenda straightened, her smile tight, like she'd rehearsed this moment. Elton leaned back, arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips. I felt the air shift, heavy with something worse than their usual jabs. Dominika, Vernon began, his voice booming like he was addressing a boardroom, we've been patient with you. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Patient? I wanted to laugh, but his stare pinned me in place. Your choices, he continued. This startup nonsense, this refusal to align with our family's values. It's been a disappointment. Glenda nodded, her pearls glinting as she folded her hands. We've given you time, Dominika, but it's clear you're not interested in contributing to our legacy. Contributing? I'd paid for Elton's European joyride, sat through years of their scorn, and they were talking about my contribution? Vernon leaned forward, his eyes cold. We've decided it's best to formalize things. As of tonight, you're no longer part of this family's financial or social circle. The words hit like a slap, sharp and surreal. Disowned. They were disowning me, right here, over lamb and Chardonnay. Mavis gasped softly, but nobody else moved. Elton's smirk widened, like he'd been waiting for this. Glenda added, It's for the best, Dominika. Elton's carrying the family name forward. You're just not a fit. My face burned, humiliation curling in my gut. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to tell them about Spark Vibe, about the deal that could make me richer than they'd ever been. But my voice caught, stuck behind years of swallowing their garbage. The room spun, their faces blurring, Mavis's pity, Glenda's fake sorrow, Vernon's smug certainty. I was the kid again, watching my certificate hit the trash. I opened my mouth, not sure what would come out, when my phone buzzed in my pocket, loud enough to make Glenda flinch. I ignored it, but it buzzed again, insistent. Something told me to check it, even as Vernon's words echoed in my head. The phone buzzed again, cutting through the haze of Vernon's words like a lifeline I didn't know I needed. My hand shook as I pulled it from my pocket. Glenda's sharp, Dominika, really? Barely registering. The screen lit up with Norris's name, and my stomach flipped. This wasn't a casual check-in. I stood, mumbling an apology, and stepped into the hallway, the dining room's suffocating air falling away. I answered, my voice low. Norris, what's up? His voice crackled with excitement. Dominika, it's done. The retail chain just signed $50 million for Spark Vibe's platform, exclusive contract. They want you on a call now to celebrate. I froze, the number echoing in my head. 50 million. My secret, my rebellion, had just become undeniable. I walked back to the dining room, phone still in hand, Norris's words buzzing louder than the humiliation still burning my cheeks. Vernon was mid-sentence, something about family priorities, but he stopped when he saw me. The room's eyes locked on, waiting for me to crumble. Instead, I felt a spark ignite, years of silence catching fire. Sorry to interrupt, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. That was my colleague. My company, Spark Vibe, just closed a $50 million deal. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Glenda's fork clattered onto her plate. Elton's smirk vanished, his mouth half open. Mavis leaned forward, whispering, 50 million? Vernon's face twitched like he was trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. Your company? He said, as if the idea was absurd. I nodded, letting the truth sink in. Yeah, the one you called a waste of time. We built a marketing platform and it's changing the game. That call? It was the deal that puts us on the map. Glenda's hand flew to her pearls, her eyes darting to Vernon, who looked like he'd swallowed his own tongue. Elton shifted, suddenly small in his chair, no quip ready. The room was silent, the kind of quiet that screams. I could have stopped there, let them stew, but something broke loose inside me. You disowned me because I didn't fit your mold, I said, looking straight at Vernon. But I built something bigger than your country club brags, and I did it without you. Mavis's jaw dropped, and a caterer in the corner stifled a gasp. For the first time, I saw fear in Glenda's eyes. Not of me, but of the world she couldn't control anymore. My phone buzzed again. Norris texting. Call's starting. I took a breath, knowing this was my moment to walk away on my terms. The silence in the dining room was deafening, like the whole world held its breath. Vernon's face was a mask of shock, his usual swagger crumbling under the weight of my words. Glenda's hand hovered over her pearls, her lips parted but no sound coming out. Elton stared at his plate, his smugness gone, replaced by something that looked like panic. I stood there, phone still warm in my hand, feeling the years of their dismissal boil up inside me. This wasn't just about the $50 million deal, it was about every time they'd made me feel small, every dollar I'd scraped together for Elton's vacations, every achievement they'd tossed aside. I wasn't done. "You know," I said, my voice calm but cutting, "I used to think I needed your approval. I paid for Elton's Europe trip, ate ramen for months because I thought it'd make you love me." Glenda flinched, her eyes darting to Vernon, who shifted uncomfortably. "But you never saw me. You billed me for his life while calling my work a hobby. And now, when Spark Vibe's worth more than your entire portfolio, you're suddenly speechless?" Mavis gasped, her wineglass trembling, but I kept going. "You disowned me tonight, but I've been on my own for years. The difference is, I built something real, without your name, your money, or your hypocrisy." Elton finally looked up, his face red. "Dominika, come on, it's not like that." I cut him off. "It's exactly like that, Elton. You've coasted on their cash, their excuses, while I fought for every inch. Enjoy your BMW. I'm done bankrolling your ego." Vernon tried to stand, his voice hoarse. "Dominika, let's discuss this privately." But I shook my head. "No, you made this public. I'm leaving and I'm not coming back to this." I turned to Mavis, who looked like she'd just watched a soap opera climax. "Thanks for the shrimp tarts. Good luck with your niece's wedding." I grabbed my blazer from the chair, my heart pounding but my steps steady. As I walked out, I heard Glenda whisper, "Vernon, do something," but he didn't. The front door clicked shut behind me, the cool night air hitting my face like freedom. I got in my car, my phone buzzing with Norris's texts about the deal call, but for a moment, I just sat there, letting the weight of what I'd done sink in. I'd exposed them, not with screams or tears, but with the truth they couldn't twist. For the first time, I felt bigger than their world, and I wasn't looking back. The next evening, I was in a different world, one that felt like home. Twyla's loft, a cozy, cluttered space above a bookstore in Seattle's Fremont neighborhood, was lit with string lights and smelled of fresh pizza. The contrast to Vernon and Glenda's sterile mansion was stark. Here, the air was warm, filled with laughter and the clink of beer bottles. Twyla, in her oversized sweater, was sprawled on a beanbag, tossing pepperoni slices to Grover, who was trying to catch them in his mouth and failing spectacularly. Norris sat cross-legged on the rug, laptop open, still riding the high of our $50 million deal, muttering about scaling strategies between sips of IPA. These were my people, the ones who'd seen me at my messiest and cheered me on anyway. I leaned back on the couch, a slice of pizza in hand, replaying the dinner in my head. Last night, I'd walked out of Vernon's house feeling like I'd shed a skin I'd outgrown. Here, with Twyla's playlists blaring and Grover's dumb jokes, I could breathe. "So," Twyla said, nudging me with her foot, "you really told your dad he's got no game? Legend." I laughed, the first real laugh in days. I mean, he tried to discuss it privately after I dropped the bomb, like that'd fix anything. Grover snorted, wiping pizza grease on his jeans. "Man, I'd pay to see their faces. Bet Elton's still crying into his trust fund." Norris looked up, grinning. "Dominika, you didn't just burn a bridge, you nuked it. Respect." We clinked bottles, and for a moment I felt lighter than I had in years. These weren't just colleagues, they were the family I'd chosen, the ones who celebrated my wins without keeping score. Twyla had been there when Spark Vibe was just a napkin sketch, Grover had bet on us when his coffee shop was sinking, and Norris had crunched numbers through nights I thought we'd fail. They didn't care about my last name or my bank account, they cared about me. As the night wore on, we swapped stories, the kind you only share with people who get you. Twyla talked about her estranged sister. Grover admitted he'd once been too scared to leave his dead-end job, and Norris confessed he still checked under his bed for monsters. I told them about the $8,000 I'd paid for Elton's trip, how it felt like buying a ticket to their love. They listened, no judgment, just nods and quiet, "Damn, that's rough" murmurs. Sitting there, surrounded by their messy, beautiful loyalty, I realized I'd never needed Vernon's table. I had this one, and it was enough. The days after the dinner were a whirlwind, but I was done letting Vernon and Glenda's world pull me back. My phone lit up with their calls and texts, Vernon's gruff voicemails about reconsidering things, Glenda's syrupy messages pretending the disownment never happened, even Elton's half-assed "let's grab coffee" note like we were buddies. I didn't respond. SparkVibe was exploding, with the retail chain deal flooding our inbox with new clients, and I had no energy for their sudden interest. They weren't reaching out because they cared. They'd smelled money and I wasn't their ATM anymore. I sat in our loft office, the hum of Norris's keyboard and Twyla's off-key humming grounding me. Between meetings, I made a plan. First, I blocked their numbers. It felt brutal, like cutting a tether. But every buzz from them had been a hook trying to drag me back to that dining room. Next, I met with a lawyer named Selma, a no-nonsense woman with a handshake like a vice. She helped me draft a letter, formal but clear. No contact, no financial ties, no access to SparkVibe or its profits. "You're drawing a line in the sand," Selma said, sliding the document across her desk. "They'll push, but this holds." I signed it, my hand steady, and mailed copies to Vernon, Glenda, and Elton. The post office's stamp felt like a gavel. When Glenda showed up at the loft a week later, banging on the door with her manicured nails, I didn't open it. Through the window, I saw her clutching her purse, lips pursed like she was ready to lecture. Twyla, ever the guard dog, leaned out and said, "Lady, read the letter, she's done." Glenda huffed off, but not before leaving a note under the door. Something about family unity. I tossed it in the trash. Grover, who'd been watching from the couch, raised his coffee mug. "To new boundaries, Dominika, you're a badass." Those boundaries became my fortress. I redirected my energy to SparkVibe, hiring more staff to handle the growth, leaning on Norris and Twyla to keep our vision tight. At home, I changed my locks, updated my will to name Twyla as my beneficiary, and donated the $1,000 contest check I'd hidden years ago to a local shelter. Each step was a brick in a wall I built for myself, not against them. They'd always see me as the kid who didn't fit, but I was done proving my worth to people who'd never see it. My life, my rules, my peace. With the dust settling from the family fallout, I turned my focus to what I could build, not just for myself but for something bigger. SparkVibe was no longer a secret rebellion, it was a force, and I wanted to use it to rewrite what my family name could mean. Vernon and Glenda's legacy was all about flash, yachts, galas, and a son who'd never had to earn a dime. Mine would be different. Grounded, purposeful, real. I started by launching a pro bono arm of SparkVibe, offering our platform free to small businesses hit hard by economic shifts. Grover's coffee shop had been my first win years ago, and I wanted to pay that forward. We helped a bakery in Tacoma, a Black-owned bookstore in Portland, even a quirky sock store run by a guy named Lyle who cried when his sales doubled. Each success felt like a brick in a new foundation, one they couldn't touch. I also got personal. I'd spent years hiding my story, ashamed of the kid who paid for Elton's vacations while eating instant noodles. So I started speaking at marketing conferences, not just about SparkVibe's tech, but about the grind behind it, the rejection, the doubt, the family who'd rather bill me than believe in me. At a Seattle Tech Summit, I shared how I'd built SparkVibe on $200 in a napkin, and the crowd gave a standing ovation. A woman named Fern, who ran a startup, grabbed me afterward, tears in her eyes. "My parents wrote me off too," she said. "You made me feel like I can keep going." That hit harder than any deal. I was reclaiming my name, not for Vernon's approval, but for people like Fern, like me. Twyla pushed me to go bigger. "Dominika, you're a story now," she said one night, waving a pizza crust. "Use it." So, we launched a mentorship program through SparkVibe, pairing young marketers with pros like Norris and me. I mentored a kid named Rudy, a shy 20-year-old with a knack for slogans but no confidence. When he pitched his first campaign and nailed it, I saw myself in his grin. This was my legacy. Lifting others, not tearing them down. Vernon's name might still be on country club plaques, but mine was on something that mattered. Lives changed, dreams sparked, a cycle broken. Sitting on my balcony, the Seattle skyline glittering against the dusk, I felt a quiet I hadn't known was possible. The city hummed below, but up here, with a mug of tea warming my hands, I was still, maybe for the first time in years. SparkVibe's success, the mentorship program, the businesses we'd saved, it all mattered, but what hit deepest was the shift inside me. I'd spent my life chasing Vernon and Glenda's approval, thinking their love would prove I was enough. But as I watched the ferries glide across Puget Sound, I realized I didn't need their validation. My worth wasn't tied to their dining room or Elton's smug grin. It was in the work I'd done, The people I'd lifted, the life I'd built from scratch. I thought about Rudy, the kid I was mentoring, how his eyes lit up when his campaign went live. Or Fern, who'd emailed me after the summit, saying she'd pitched her startup to investors because of my talk. Those moments weren't just wins. They were proof I'd broken the cycle. Vernon and Glenda's world ran on control, on love doled out like a paycheck you had to earn. I'd grown up believing I owed them, that my value was in what I could give, money, time, silence. But now, I saw it clearly, love shouldn't cost you your soul. I'd found mine in Twyla's laughter, Grover's terrible pizza-catching skills, Norris's late-night number-crunching, in myself. I still carried scars, the sting of that $8,000 invoice, the memory of my certificate in the trash. But they didn't define me anymore. I'd turned pain into purpose, not to prove them wrong, but to prove myself right. As the sky darkened, I made a promise. I'd keep building, keep lifting others, keep choosing people who saw me. Peace wasn't in their approval. It was in knowing I was enough, always had been. Have you ever had to walk away from people who couldn't see your worth? I know how hard it is to choose yourself, to let go of the hope that they'll change, but standing on the other side, I can tell you it's worth it. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments, maybe about a time you broke free or found your own spark. If my journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to define success on their own terms. You don't have to fit anyone's mold to shine. Keep building your own path, because you're enough, just as you are.